Jonathan Roumie, known for playing Jesus in the hit series The Chosen, and his fellow cast members met Pope Leo the Fourteenth in St. Peter's Square during the general audience. Roumie called the experience an immeasurable honor, noting the meeting reinforced their mission to bring Jesus to viewers worldwide.
What happens when the man who plays Jesus meets the man who leads over 1 billion Christians? Actor Jonathan Roumie stood face to face with Pope Leo the Fourteenth, and what followed stunned millions. A simple handshake turned into a moment of global conversation, sparking debate, reflection, and even silence.
Actor Jonathan Roumie and director Dallas Jenkins were among the crowd at the Pope's general audience in Paul VI Hall. Roumie plays Jesus Christ in The Chosen, a multi-season TV series directed by Jenkins.
Some have even said the Pope refused to shake the actor, but was that the case? Join us as we reveal details about Pope Leo's seeming refusal to shake Roumie's hand and the action he took next. The papal moment. Millions didn't see coming. It was supposed to be one of those moments that live forever in history, the kind you expect to see framed in church bulletins or shown at Easter services for decades. A moment where the man playing Jesus meets the man seen by over 1 billion people as Christ's representative on earth. But what happened in that short, unexpected pause between two men, one actor, one pope, stopped people in their tracks. The cast and crew of The Chosen gathered in St. Peter's Square after they had just wrapped filming one of the most intense parts of the series, the crucifixion scenes for Season 6, shot in Matera, Italy. That same rocky landscape was used in The Passion of the Christ. The location already carried a heavy emotional weight, and now that weight followed them to the Vatican. Yet, no one could imagine what the day would bring. What would later happen would stun the world. They arrived just before sunrise, and the square was quiet at first, still cool from the night air. Roumie and the cast had been up since 4 a.m., some in prayer, others sitting in silence. No one really knew what to expect. They were invited by name, but the agenda had been vague. They'd been told there might be a meeting, maybe a photo, but nothing was promised. For Jonathan Roumie, this visit wasn't just a media stop, it was personal. He had spoken before about how playing Jesus wasn't just a job, it was a calling. Years ago, before the show existed, Roumie had been broke. Not metaphorically, literally down to $20. Rent due, no work, no safety net, and in that moment, he had done something that would change the course of his life. He got on his knees and gave his life to God. Not long after, doors started opening. One of those doors led him straight into the sandals of Jesus in a small Dallas-based show that would somehow end up being streamed by over 600 million people around the world. So, standing there in front of Pope Leo the Fourteenth, Roumie wasn't just another actor meeting a world leader. He was a believer meeting someone he had long looked up to, not as a celebrity, but as a spiritual father. The Pope himself is a history maker. The first American to hold the position, born in Chicago, raised in a working-class Catholic family.
The author details the influence of growing up in Chicago at a time when America had close-knit Catholic families, thriving parishes, and places of joy in the faith.
And known for his calm, quiet demeanor. He had surprised many with his election. Some saw him as a breath of fresh air, others saw him as a disruption. But no one denied the weight of the moment as he made his way across St. Peter's Square to greet the Chosen team. He didn't rush. Surrounded by aides and Swiss guards, he walked slowly, offering quick nods and soft smiles. The crowd quieted as he neared. Every phone lifted, every camera trained on what was about to happen. Roumie stepped forward, smiling. He extended his hand toward the Pope, and then it happened. There was a pause. Not a long one, barely a second, maybe two, but enough for those watching closely to notice. The Pope didn't immediately extend his hand in return. He looked at Roumie almost as if studying him for a moment. Some witnesses described it as a hesitation. Others said it looked like the Pope was waiting for something. The crowd held its breath, Even Roumie's castmates, who had been through every kind of shoot imaginable, looked uncertain. This wasn't scripted. This wasn't part of the plan. The Vatican press officer, standing nearby, shifted slightly, as if preparing to explain something, but before he could speak, the Pope reached out. Then finally, the handshake happened. Brief, polite, but something about it felt off. Was it tiredness, miscommunication, or something deeper? People in the crowd began whispering. Journalists who had covered hundreds of Vatican meetings said they had never seen Pope Leo hesitate like that. He was usually warm and natural with guests, but this time, something felt different. And that small delay, just a few seconds, became the most talked about moment of the day. What happened next is even more interesting. Did the Pope snub Jesus? People online immediately started asking questions. Was it a pause out of respect? Out of caution? Was it just how Pope Leo handles these types of meetings? Or was there something deeper going on? Some fans thought it looked like the Pope wasn't sure whether to engage. One comment online said the Pope looked like he was sizing him up. Others thought maybe the Pope didn't recognize Roumie at all, which surprisingly might not be that far-fetched. While Pope Leo has spoken often about media's impact on faith, he's never publicly said he watches The Chosen. During their brief conversation, he reportedly didn't mention the show at all. In fact, when the subject came up, he only noted that his brother is a fan. Now, that could have been just a polite mention, maybe a way of saying he was aware of it. But some people took it as a sign that the Pope was being careful, that he didn't want to directly engage with a TV portrayal of Jesus, no matter how popular it is. That caution might make sense, considering who he is. Pope Leo is known for sticking to tradition. He's cautious about modern portrayals of sacred figures. He's not flashy and doesn't jump on cultural trends. Some insiders have said that while he respects new ways of reaching people, he worries about confusing faith with entertainment. So, when Jonathan Roumie, who doesn't just play Jesus but is also seen by many as a kind of spiritual figure, stood in front of him,
A smile materialized on the Pope's face when Roumie told him of his role as Jesus in The Chosen.
maybe that pause wasn't accidental. Maybe it was careful and deliberate. Body language analysts who reviewed the video said the Pope seemed gracious, but slightly guarded. They noted the difference between his usual warm greetings and what looked like a more measured response here. At the same time, it's important to remember that the Pope meets hundreds of people during these events. He's on a tight schedule, and he might have simply been tired, distracted, or following some preset plan. Not everything is a symbol, but when something feels unusual, especially in a moment this big, people notice. And the internet noticed fast, with some fans of The Chosen taking it personally. They felt Roumie had done so much to bring people closer to the Bible, and they hoped the church would recognize that. Others argued that playing Jesus, no matter how respectfully, can cause confusion, especially among younger believers who don't separate the actor from the role. It's a tightrope Roumie has walked for years. He's said before that he's not Jesus, he just plays him, and tries to live in a way that honors the role. But when fans call him Jesus in public, or treat him like a spiritual leader, it creates a strange tension, one that maybe even the Pope wasn't sure how to respond to. Even among church leaders, the conversation picked up. A few priests said privately that the Pope may have been making a subtle point, drawing a clear line between reverence for the real Jesus and admiration for a portrayal. Others in the Vatican press office pushed back, calling it an overreaction from the public. Despite all the talk, there was a handshake, and there was a photo, one where both men looked calm, respectful, even peaceful. Roumie handed over a small gift, a DVD set of The Chosen. The Pope accepted it, smiled, and nodded. Later, they even took a group selfie with the rest of the cast. It wasn't cold, it wasn't hostile, but people kept coming back to that first moment. That delay, that look, that pause, that said more than words ever could. Then, just when the conversation started to settle down, something strange happened. The gesture that changed everything. Just hours after the meeting between Pope Leo the Fourteenth and the Chosen cast, the world was still trying to make sense of what had happened. The handshake had been polite but awkward. The Pope's reaction felt guarded. The conversation between him and Jonathan Roumie didn't last long, and the internet was already filled with theories. Then something unexpected happened. Without warning, the official Instagram account for the Pope posted a new set of photos. No statement from the Vatican, no interview, just a quiet upload in the middle of the day. A few pictures, mostly of the Pope greeting the crowd, blessing children, and walking through St. Peter's Square. But the last photo? That's what caught everyone's attention. There was Jonathan Roumie standing beside the Pope, taking a selfie with other people in the background. No names were mentioned in the caption, no tags, and no credits. The caption below the post didn't reference the Chosen. It didn't say Roumie's name, it simply talked about growing closer to Jesus through acts of faith. A short message about grace, humility, and the power of prayer. But to a lot of people watching, it felt personal, too personal to ignore. Some said it was a kind way of acknowledging Roumie's role without saying too much. Others thought it was more of a reminder that faith isn't about public figures or popular shows, it's about Christ, and Christ alone. The comment section exploded. Fans of The Chosen said it was a subtle endorsement. Critics called it a careful correction. Either way, it felt like the post said everything the Pope didn't say out loud earlier that day. Theologians weighed in quickly. Some believed it was a smart move, a way for the Pope to tip his hat to Roumie's influence without crossing into celebrity territory. Others saw it differently. They argued it was the Church's way of drawing a line between sacred tradition and modern portrayals. But while everyone else argued, Roumie stayed quiet. There was no Instagram story, no reaction video, no dramatic response, just silence. Then, the next morning, something happened that didn't make headlines, at least not right away. One of Roumie's team members later confirmed that he had gone to a small Roman chapel. No cameras, no press, and not even his castmates went with him. He just woke up early, grabbed a cab, and asked to be dropped off near the Church of San Lorenzo in Lucina, a quiet, tucked-away spot most tourists never even notice. Inside, he reportedly sat alone in front of the Eucharist for over an hour. No speaking, no journaling, just sitting, praying, reflecting, and surrendering. There were no photos of this moment, no social media proof, and no press releases. Just a second-hand account whispered to a few Catholic reporters who later confirmed it through chapel staff. Why did he go? According to someone close to him, Roumie wanted to take the spotlight off himself. He had felt the weight of all the speculation, all the attention, and knew this wasn't about his image or the handshake or even the show. For him, it was about faith. It was about staying grounded in the thing that led him there in the first place. That quiet trip to the chapel said more than any interview ever could. It told people that no matter what headlines were flying around about whether the Pope was cold or if the Chosen had crossed a line, Roumie wasn't interested in being the center of the story. He never claimed to be Jesus, he just plays him, and he's always been careful to remind people of that. But the world can be quick to mix things up. When someone plays a role like that, and does it well, it's easy for people to project meaning that was never meant to be there. Still, it's hard to blame them. The Chosen has reached millions of people in a way that few religious shows ever have.
One of my favorite series, The Chosen, is back for a brand new season. Jonathan Roumie returns as the title character, also known as Jesus Christ.
For many, Roumie is the first face of Jesus they've truly connected with. That's a huge responsibility, and Roumie knows it. The moment in St. Peter's Square will be remembered, not just for what was said or what wasn't, but for the emotion packed into that handshake, that look, that pause, and then the Pope's silent post. But what happened the next morning, that quiet trip to a forgotten church in Rome, may have been the most important moment of all. While the world argued about photos and posts and meanings, Roumie chose something else. He chose stillness, and he chose prayer. He chose not to respond with more noise, but with silence. That decision, made without fanfare, shifted the tone of the conversation. Suddenly, it wasn't just about whether the Pope hesitated or if the post was about Roumie. It became about humility. It became about remembering what this all started from. A simple story of faith, told by people who believe in something bigger than themselves. In the end, maybe that's the real gesture that changed everything. You don't want to miss the final chapter. What this moment reveals about faith today. In the days after the meeting, social media exploded. The hashtags were everywhere. TikTok slowed the video down frame by frame, pointing out every blink, every glance. Memes came in fast. Some were funny, some sharp, others flat out critical. Everyone seemed to have an opinion, but behind all the noise, there was something else going on. Something quieter, and maybe more important. What really happens when the man who plays Jesus comes face to face with the man people call the Vicar of Christ? This wasn't just another celebrity meeting a religious leader. This was something different. One of them tells the story of Jesus in a way millions connect with on screen. The other carries the weight of guiding the largest Christian church on earth. People came in with all kinds of expectations. Some thought they'd see a powerful show of unity, while others hoped for a warm endorsement. A few were even looking for signs, some deeper meaning to pull from the moment. But what they got was subtle and unspoken. It left room for interpretation, and that's what made it so powerful. For starters, this wasn't about a handshake, not really. It wasn't about whether the Pope smiled fast enough or if Roumie bowed deeply enough. The real question underneath all of it was, what does this moment say about the state of faith today? Millions of people are hungry for something real. That's a big part of why The Chosen has become so popular. It doesn't preach, it shows and makes faith feel close. It brings ancient stories into the lives of people who feel disconnected from traditional church settings. For many, watching The Chosen is the first time they've cried during a Bible story, or even the first time they've watched one. Then there's Pope Leo the Fourteenth. He's a different kind of leader, firm, careful, and rooted in tradition. He doesn't rush to comment on trends, rarely makes statements that feel emotional or casual, and his approach is more measured. He's known for focusing on truth and structure, not popularity. So, when these two men came together, people expected some sort of big emotional payoff. But instead of fireworks, the moment played out quietly, almost awkwardly. And maybe that's exactly why it mattered. It reminded people that faith isn't always about performance. It isn't always loud or exciting. Sometimes it's just about presence. It's about standing in the same space with someone and letting silence do the talking. The Pope's hesitation? It might have been caution or maybe respect. Roumie's stillness afterward? Probably humility. Neither one tried to turn the moment into something it wasn't. In a world that's used to constant drama and instant reactions, that was surprising. There was no clash, no dramatic speech, and no big endorsement. Yet the whole thing was deeply meaningful because it reflected where so many people are today. People are searching, not always for institutions, but for something they can feel, something that helps them make sense of the mess in their lives. That's why the meeting between these two men struck such a chord. One stands for tradition, doctrine, and thousands of years of structure. The other is part of a storytelling project that's opened up Jesus to people who never thought they'd care. Their handshake, delayed or not, wasn't about agreement. It was a meeting point between two very different parts of the modern faith journey. Even the Pope's Instagram post after the meeting carried this tension. The message was about faith, about grace, but it didn't name Roumie or The Chosen. That wasn't an accident, and it wasn't cold either. It was a way of showing that the focus stays on Christ, not on the actors, the cameras, or the headlines. Roumie seemed to understand that he didn't chase a viral moment, nor did he try to explain away the Pope's reaction. He just stayed steady, quiet, and thankful. In fact, what people will probably remember most about him from this trip isn't the moment in front of the crowd, but the one behind closed doors, alone in a small chapel, praying without cameras, without fans, and without saying a word about it afterward. In a time where everyone wants to go viral, that kind of silence is rare and powerful. So, what does this moment reveal about faith today? It shows that people still care deeply, that they're still watching, that they still want to feel close to something holy, even if they're not sure how to find it. It shows that reverence isn't dead, and that it can still live in quiet pauses and gentle hesitations. It shows that humility still matters, and that real faith doesn't always need to be explained. Sometimes it just shows up, even when the cameras are on. Maybe that's the message behind all of this, that even in a world full of noise, faith is still found in the stillness. What do you think about Roumie's meeting with the Pope? Kindly share your answers, thoughts, and opinions in the comments section. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to this channel to enjoy more videos like this. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.